Go through, I think a first thing we're going to do is just go around the room and everybody can introduce yourselves, even though you have name tables, so members of the public can know who members of our city staff are. And then we'll go through the agenda. What we're going to do tonight is review our draft council priority document with all of you. We'll spend some time doing that, and then the City Council will identify its priorities for FY 2019 and then do a selection of areas of responsibilities for individual council members. So before we dig into the draft priority document, why don't we start with Mr. Clark and we'll go around the room. And you have to press the button.
Everybody has to push their buttons.
Good evening, Greg Clark. I'm the Director of Recreation.
Hello, I'm Alexis Blackwell, the HR Director.
Sarah Daines, Director of the Housing and Community Development Department.
Good evening, Tony Duvall, the Police Chief.
Hi, Suzanne Ludlow, City Manager.
Jesse Carpenter, City Clerk. Cindy DeBala, Ward 2 Council Member.
Peter KOVAR, Ward 1 Council Member.
Kate Stewart, Mayor.
Talisha Searcy, Ward 6 Council Member.
Casey Kostick, Ward 3 Council Member.
Jason Dearweber, Deputy City Manager.
Susan Chung, Finance Director.
Daryl Braithwaite, Public Works Director.
Ellen Robbins, Library Director.
Lars DeSalvio. Mike's obviously not working on the IT manager.
Apropos. That's very. So just to do a little background for everyone. About 3 years ago, the prior city council, when we first came together, decided it was a good opportunity to set down our priorities for the time we would be working together over 2 years. As I said, kind of map to know where we're headed. This city council will be together for 3 years because our next election is in 2020 because we switched the timing of our elections to be in sync with state and federal elections. And so we spent time in January reviewing the priorities the prior city council had put together and updating them and basically making them the priorities for this city council. What we're doing new this year is that we thought it would be useful before we adopted the priorities to sit down and talk to the city staff to get your input, your experience, your wisdom doing the day-to-day work of the city to see how we may change any of these priorities or strategies in which we want to accomplish them over the next 3 years. So that's why we're here tonight. This is the first time we're doing this, and I'm excited about it, and we'll see how it goes. So I appreciate all of you being here this evening. I think how we'll do this is everybody should have a packet of the priorities in front of you. They're also nicely blown up on the wall over here. And we'll just sort of go through each of the overarching priorities. I'll just review them, and we'll open them up for discussion and then walk through each of them. So the first is priority is a livable community for all. Underneath that priority, we have 4 goals. The first is identifying program needs in the community and develop approaches to meet those needs, emphasizing youth, family, seniors, and our more vulnerable residents, such as those with lower incomes, immigrants, people with disabilities. The strategy we have next to that goal is to utilize the resident survey, staff and committee reports, and other resources to determine where there may be existing gaps in program offerings, develop programs, and close gaps. And our outcome is expanded or improved programming tailored to those residents. Our next goal is to ensure we have a range of safe, quality, and stable housing options that are affordable for residents of varying incomes and all races and ethnicities. As you can see, we have 4 strategies under that you can each read. Many of them will come out of the draft strategic plan and the work we're doing on that and the meeting we had on Monday night. Our desired outcome for this goal is to meet the current and future housing needs of the community, to ensure affordable housing options for residents of varying income levels and of all races and ethnicities, and improved living conditions for renters. The third overall goal is to defend our status as a sanctuary city and to continue to be a welcoming and inclusive community for all. And desired outcome is to remain a strong sanctuary city. Our final goal in this category is further efforts related to racial equity. As a reminder, the city adopted a racial equity framework last year for our work. This year and moving forward over the next couple of years, we want to develop strategies to address racial equity issues, including how we organize, institutionalize, and operationalize the racial equity framework, and explore a possible task force on racial equity, provide training, and possibly conduct a racial equity survey among city staff members. Our outcome here is progress toward a racially equitable community and government. In this category, we also have major projects and initiatives and ongoing activities that we want to make sure we keep track of. That's advocating for city residents with respect to MCPS site selection and the Piney Branch facility study and pool. Our continued work on sidewalks, retrofitting sidewalks to meet ADA requirements, and sidewalk design improvements, public land and open space management plan, the public transit, bike, and pedestrian safety projects, including continuation of the Safe Routes to School program and bike improvements, and the cultural plan, implementation of recommendations included in FY16 update. So that's our overarching first priority, a livable community for all. I'll just open it up if people have comments on that. Any suggestions? And if you want to speak, you just wave your hand or press your button and start talking.
I think I'll open just a few comments, and that is both here and as we go throughout these various priorities, there's been quite a lot of discussion about just even what we need for our ongoing projects and initiatives. So as you hear some of the comments from the staff members, you'll hear about even the demands they have on staff just to do what are things that we're absolutely committed to, even before we talk about these priorities. I think one of the biggest items on this livable community for all is, as you mentioned, the Affordable Housing and Economic Development Strategic Plan. And so, Sarah, would you like to talk a little bit about what you're envisioning about how your staff would be doing, following up on the comments and things that we did on Monday?
Good evening. When you look at the staff allocation with the various departments, you'll note the Housing and Community Development Department. It's one of the smaller departments in the city, and it's divided into essentially 3 different divisions: administration, planning and development services, and housing and communities development services. In working with each of those divisions, we've been working on this Housing and Economic Development Strategic Plan, which includes a variety of recommendations which are going to be presented to the City Council in March. Not all of the recommendations are things that you will particularly want to advance. Many of them are long-term efforts, and some we can do tomorrow or are in the process of working on. In going through the list and incorporating the recommendations that are in the priorities that were identified by the City Council, our workload exceeds our staff capacity by an amazing amount. I put together a list of just the programs that we do on an ongoing basis, and while it's not hot and heavy every single day of the week throughout the year, there's a lot of commitment in terms of staff time and energy as far as making those efforts come to reality. We have a lot of programmings that impact people directly as well as the community as a whole. So if you look at the priorities that have been identified here and totally ignore the strategic plan, many of them, particularly in a livable community for all, we touch on the fiscally sustainable government, the engaged response, pretty much everything, even the environmental sustainable community component. So in speaking with the city manager, one of the recommendations that we're going to be advancing during the budgeting process is advancing the recommendation within the strategic plan in terms of creating an economic development division within the department. Essentially what that would allow us to do is to provide support for the plan itself and then create a planning division that focuses primarily on the land use, long-range planning efforts, and short-range plans, and then create an area where we can focus specifically on the economic development activities. Right now it's kind of, we're doing it all, and we need additional staff time to do that and maintain our sanity at the same time. So we've submitted a proposal for that.
Right. So most of that will come in some of the other goals. I think our staff on the housing portion is probably okay for right now, but it'll depend a little bit on what you choose when you go through the implementation steps that you want to choose for the housing portion of the strategic plan. The other thing that I think is important in this livable community category has to do with the advancing the goal of racial equity. And one of the things that we've been having discussions about, and I'm considering putting forward, is maybe a half-time position or some assistance for the HR division to really champion the racial equity issue. And it may come out of another division, but a lot of it does have to do with our workforce as well as how we work with our programming. And so that's one of those things that we're trying to figure out, where do we have capacity to actually make a substantial step on that. I don't know if, one of the big livable community items, we've got a number of things that come out of the public workshop in terms of sidewalk work and the bike plans and those kinds of things. So we have a good amount to do with that. I don't know, though, that we have a need necessarily for an extra staff person for that aspect. So I don't know if other people want to speak to the livable community. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You need to push the button.
Does that work? Yes. I would like to make a brief statement with regard to library programming now and in the future, because it pretty much all falls under the umbrella of livable community. Right now we do 13 different kinds of public and school programs that emphasize early literacy, STEAM skill building, critical thinking, and visual literacy skills. Our books and breakfast visits with ESOL families through partnership with TPES, our preschool programs, and our elementary school programs expand our community outreach, connecting students and their teachers with the library. In 2017, we had 84 school visits, all in coordination with the language arts curriculum at the schools. Altogether, we conduct more than 350 programs annually with an attendance of more than 17,000. We do this all with one full-time and one part-time children's librarian and a library associate. Our half-time children's librarian works every Sunday, leaving her with little time to do programs during the week. If she was full-time, we could do more outreach programming and programs for teens, which is a long-range goal we have. So that is our plan for the future, and just wanted to make that statement.
And I'll just say that when we come to the issues with the library, we're having to look at a couple different kinds of things. One is it's going to take a little bit before the actual construction happens with the library, but once we get to that point, how we serve in different locations, we're still working on what that means and how that means deploying staff. With the one kind of other side of things that comes through our service provisions with the engaged, responsive, service-oriented government or other things is that in the library, the half-time librarian is is frankly younger than most of the rest of those that have library degrees. And so one of the things that we do try to do over time is make sure we have some succession planning. So we're looking at that as well. I was wondering if the Recreation Director could talk a little bit about what you've done this past to adapt to the previous priorities, and also just recognize that we are looking forward to what the results of the resident survey to see if there are some extra steps we need to take.
This past fiscal year, in the Recreation Department, we actually sort of reorganized our department. We've taken a halftime sports position and a halftime position within our team program, actually combined it to get a youth success position, which will be a career position. Excuse me. We're actually in the process of hiring for that position as we speak. A few of the things that we have that are coming up that we will be experiencing is, and we've been getting a lot of calls and inquiries regarding an increase in senior programs in the evening and weekends. So that's something, a trend that we will see, that we will act on moving forward. As well as we're looking to expand on our youth outreach with that youth success position. Right now in the budget we have just that career position, which we will get started with, but I foresee adding additional part-time staff to assist with outreach efforts and programming and things like that for that position.
Okay, I think that's,
yeah. Yeah, sorry.
I don't mean to interrupt. Is there any way we've got some fellow workers here that we wanted to take a couple minutes of your time? We understood that this is a staff meeting on council priorities and wanted to call attention to the fact that union members have...
I'm sorry, Sean. We've begun our meeting and we had posted an agenda. If there are comments you'd like to submit, we can look at them later, but we have our regular council meeting next week on March 7th if you'd like to come during public comments. But we've already begun our meeting.
Sure.
And so
I think Sean's point was if we're talking about council priorities going forward, it would be smart and useful to have contacts with the union as well, and not just public comment, but comment with the rank and file workers who are going to implement your good ideas.
thank you. I appreciate I think the council appreciates your input. As I mentioned, we've begun our meeting tonight. We can look in the future of how to incorporate your input in this, and so.
Was there any way, so like 2 more minutes, we do have a report of our pay performances, and that's the reason we did come here tonight, and I have, like I said, several people coming to support. Just to hand these out to you, these are...
We can give them to Mr. Clark, and he'll pass them down.
No, this is not something that we can...
No,
we're in the middle of negotiations.
We are,
so
right, and we're in the middle of negotiations and mediation,
it.
so I'd really appreciate...
It's informational only.
Yeah,
then we can...
The names are redacted. Sorry to interrupt everything. Just a miscommunication of the nature of this meeting, but...
Okay.
This report, and this is our current evaluation system, and it shows who has been evaluated when and what their rating was.
Okay, and I apologize for the miscommunication. All our agenda are posted on the city website at least 10 days and sometimes 2 weeks beforehand. This meeting and the how we were proceeding with this meeting has been on the rolling agenda for months. So I apologize that if there was any miscommunication. So thank you for the information, and thank you for coming this evening. So let's see, where were we? Are there any other comments regarding the livable community for all priority? I would like to ask the staff, is there anything missing that, because you all are doing the day-to-day work, these are priorities the council put together. Is there anything that we overlooked or missed?
Just a comment to remind folks that there's a B and a P following each strategy, which stand for, the B is budget implications, the P is policy or management focus. And as we go through some of these, I just wanted to call your attention to those, so you know what could have a budget impact, or what is more focused on your all as council's discussions at future meetings in order to set policy. For a livable community for all, we talked about the staffing requirements and HCD and possibly in the library. I think as it relates to the programming needs, we're pretty well set in recreation based on the priorities and the follow-through on those priorities from the last time, for the existing priorities. But as we add programs, there could be budget implications there unless we're discontinuing certain programs.
Yeah, and we did have discussions with all the staff to see if there were some other things that should be on here, and I think we're pretty comfortable with this list.
Councilmember Kovar.
Thank you, and thank you for all the presentation. There were two things I wanted to ask about, which can be responded to separately because they're not directly connected. One of the things that we talked about when we had our retreat, and the council didn't want to have a formal priority on the document for this year, was taking a look at the food and nutrition programs, in particular in the rec programs. I mentioned this to Mr. Clark and certainly to the city manager as well. And I think the way we left that was that at an appropriate point, which is not immediately now, but that the staff would sort of survey or write up what they do in terms of that and then report back to us. So I think everybody agreed that didn't need to be listed specifically in the document, but that it was sort of embraced within, I think, the first square on the left under a livable community for all. So I just wanted to mention that one to make sure it didn't, disappear. Because I know all these things require staff work, and I'm trying to be sensitive to that, but I think it's something that could be done. And then the second thing is completely separate from that, and it's just something on the racial equity. I noticed, for example, that Fairfax, I think it was, they have a similar program, and they developed this entire policy, and maybe you all have seen it, where it lays out in detail how the racial equity lens would work. And so I don't know whether that requires an additional staff person or not. That's a separate question, but we hadn't really talked about in detail about next steps on that. And maybe one way to get more or a better focus on how to use that on each agenda item that comes forward would be to develop a policy that's beyond just our resolution, which created it. So that's just something I'll put out
and
there.
actually, when we've been in conversation with the folks in Fairfax.
Good.
So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Oh, and just to let you know, also the report back on the snacks and other things is on the longer list of items that the city clerk keeps to make sure that
we don't
come
lose
back
it.
We don't lose it.
I wasn't suggesting.
No, I just
I wasn't suggesting it wouldn't. I just wanted to mention
make sure.
It wasn't mentioned specifically. Thank you.
Great. So then we will move on to fiscally sustainable government. Under there are 4 goals: increasing funding from county and state to address tax duplication and other city needs. There are 3 strategies connected to that goal, and the desired outcome is increased funding from county and state to address tax duplication and other city needs. The next goal here is adopt a financial policy to determine the appropriate level of designated reserves, and we want to formally establish reserve levels. The next goal is minimizing adverse impacts of changes to the federal tax system. And here we want to minimize adverse impacts of changes to the federal tax system is our outcome. That's our goal and our outcome. The final goal in this section is adopt sustainable investment and banking policy and practices. This grows out of the work that the Nuclear Free Committee has brought to our attention. And our goal, our desired outcome here is work to align the city's banking and investments with sustainability values. Major projects and initiatives and ongoing activities here include modifying budget documents in accordance with GFOA standards of excellence